Varlamore really did bring so many interesting skilling methods into the game, and one of those is calcified rock mining. Now, I know many of you have explored this method already, but I want to showcase just how powerful this method really can be, especially for an early and mid-game account. So, the only real requirement to doing this is completing the Perilous Moons quest, which will take you to Torum, and this requires 48 Slayer. That's really the highest requirement. Everything else is like 20 Hunter, 20 Fishing, 20 Rune Crafting. The only real challenge to the quest is just completing a run of Moons of Peril, which honestly can be done at a very low level because you can just get as many supplies throughout the minigame as you want. And then just facing the enemies is pretty basic. However, it is recommended to have higher defense, of course. Throughout the city, there are some pretty powerful amenities, such as the shops with unlimited stocks to buy wines and stews and things. But over here to the east, you'll find the mine, which has some traditional rocks, but it also has 16 calcified rocks. Now, there are two different tick manipulation methods that can be used here that I would recommend. One is just traditional 3 ticking or 1.5 ticking. Technically it's 1.5 ticking because every roll you actually do have the chance of gathering 2 resources, whereas I think traditionally we say 3 ticking. Oftentimes it still is kind of a 1.5 tick cycle because you're getting a double roll, but you don't actually end up getting both resources. In this case, you actually do have a chance of obtaining 2 rolls of the bone shards. So this is technically 1.5 ticking, and this method is extremely powerful, offering rates up to about 95k XP mining an hour, which is quite substantial. I'm only level 89 here, and I was getting about just over 90k long term. So this is definitely recommended if you're wanting to just be as efficient as possible. Every 1 to 2 minutes, you will see a little waterfall kind of going on, and that gives you a 15% increased chance of successfully rolling bone shards. So it's not that crazy, and you could honestly ignore it if it's too far out of the way. With 3 ticking, you definitely want to find a world with as few players as possible because you want to find a spot with at least 2 veins, preferably 3, just in case one of them depletes. You can go over to another one conveniently, and you don't need to really be chasing the waterfalls. This is one of those methods where a gnome cube or any sort of item that could start a 3-tick action in 1 click would go so crazy. I really am hoping that in the next year or so, Jagex finally comes to their senses and just realizes that tick manipulation is here to stay, and we really should be leaning into the fun of it and not so much the wrist-breaking nature of it. Because honestly, even as an efficient player occasionally, I don't want to be doing this long term. This is just absolutely brutal on the wrist. This next method is considered either 4 ticking or 2 ticking. I consider it 2 ticking because, again, every roll you actually have the chance of obtaining both rolls of resources. This is my absolute favorite method by far because of just how chill it is while also remaining somewhat efficient. I was getting just about 60k plus XP per hour. You could probably expect around 65k at 99. Although this method is extremely chill, starting the cycle initially can be a bit tricky. Every time you want to initiate a 4-tick cycle, you're going to have to stand adjacent to one of the veins, click on it, and then the very following tick, click on the next vein. Now you're in the 4-tick cycle. If you're unfamiliar with the timing of ticks, using game sounds can be extremely helpful because every 4 ticks you're going to hear a little pickaxe sound, and that indicates when to click on the next spot. Also, it could be useful to go to the plugin called Report button and change the display options to game ticks. As you're watching me mine right here, you can actually count the ticks down below where my report button is, and every 4 ticks, that's when I'm clicking on the next spot. If you're off cycle or you haven't had an XP drop in a while, you can always just reset the cycle. This is also something you're going to have to reset every time a vein depletes. The last method I'll showcase is just AFKing with a dragon pickaxe. Again, dragon pickaxe is slightly more efficient than a rune pickaxe, slightly less than a crystal pickaxe, but it's about 46k-ish long term for me at level 89. And this works just fine for those that are really just trying to chill. So a couple things to note generally about this mining method is that mining enhancers such as Varrock armor don't provide any extra resources with calcified rocks, neither does the celestial ring. However, you're still going to get that mining boost from wearing a celestial ring, and obviously wearing full prospector is still going to give you that 2.5% mining boost. At a relatively high mining level, AFKing, you can bank about 16 to 18k prayer XP per hour. And if you're going to giga sweat and do the 1.5 ticking, you can bank actually upward of about 35k prayer XP an hour. While mining, there's a 1 in 75 chance per roll of receiving a calcified deposit, which can be brought to an anvil using a hammer to either receive some additional bone shards or these calcified moths, which are the teleport to get to Camp Torum. It is a bit upsetting that you're only getting 1 smithing XP per action on the anvil. I also tested the smithing outfit to see if you got an enhanced speed when using it at the anvil, and it just doesn't work. Now, if you've messed around at all throughout Varlamore, you've probably received some amount of blessed bone shards. These are basically stackable bones that can be sacrificed at the libation bowl at the Tiamat, which is right above Camp Torum on the mountain. This is one of my favorite prayer training methods just because of the sheer XP per hour you can get once, of course, you've gotten a huge stack of these blessed bone shards. And the way to maximize your XP is by actually using Sunfire Splinters, which now there's many ways to obtain. You're basically going to be using a pestle and mortar and crushing these Sunfire Splinters, 2 per jug of wine, into the jugs of wine. And then what you're going to do is bring it up to the mountain and bless these jugs of wine, and then run over to the libation bowl with your stack of bone shards and just get 600 XP every single tick. And it is glorious. I would personally recommend bringing a prayer pot. Some people just don't want to waste any bit of the prayer and they run over to the altar, which I will show at the end just how slow it can be. I would highly recommend just bringing a prayer pot or any sort of prayer rejuvenation, just because it's going to speed up your gains if you have a massive stack of bone shards to use. But truly, this is one of the most addicting methods and one of the cool perks about Camp Torum mining, because alongside generous mining XP, you're also just banking prayer, which over the years has actually gotten quite easier. I think there's just so many ways to train prayer, and there's ensouled heads and there's these different Archaea spells, but it used to be a serious like slug of a grind to get through. And nowadays you can just mine and get prayer, which is just so interesting and cool. Overall, I'm a huge fan of Camp Torum mining. This is one of my go-to spots. If you've listened to my Sebe casts recently, I'm here quite a bit. I do think, however, there are better spots to sweat. I think this is one of those spots that actually probably encourages the AFK a little bit more, just because of how generous AFKing here really is already. I think a place like gem mining or sandstone mining or granite would be a better place to spend your, quote unquote efficient energy at. This is one of those spots that if you haven't taken advantage of it at all and you're an Iron Man specifically, I would highly recommend giving this a try. Thank you all for watching. If you have any questions, leave it down in the comments and I'll do my best to respond.